What do you guys think about that quote?
Oh, it's a great quote.
Gio, what do you think about that quote? That quote was amazing.
I mean, it encapsulates the entire movie right there. Our job is done. We can go.
It's fantastic,
Oh,
bro.
oh man, this is gonna be a good episode. For all of you who are not, watching us on YouTube, which Gio can tell you why not. Um, the quote that we're putting on about this film, since it is a silent film, we have to actually display it and give it justice. Put in a little background on it, background music. Um, Anybody
Yep.
wants to take a guess and take a stab at it and go ahead and read it?
The mediator
I like
between the
Ray's
head and the
reading.
hands must be the heart.
Yes. Which makes
Basically, the subtext of the entire movie.
yes.
And of course, it's a silent movie, so we just put it up as a place card.
So yeah, if you are not following us on YouTube, go ahead do it. It's that way you,
Yeah.
you don't miss out
Go
on
for it, guys.
all the little things that my second feels that we are not going to tell you about on the podcast. You have to kind of watch it. So
Go do it, guys. Enjoy
yeah,
that.
if you don't already know by our title on the screen or our title on the episode when you're downloading this, we're talking about a classic sci-fi film done in 1927 called Metropolis. And oh boy, it's filled with content. But the treat for you guys on this episode is the fact that all three of us have a complete different view on this film. So let's see how we do this one. And I do understand now, Gio, when you mentioned to us, um, it's going to be an interesting episode.
The polemic.
Very, very interesting episode. So should we go into our first segment?
Go for it.
We are Science Fiction Remnant.
This is the Funny Science Fiction Podcast.
We are the Caribbean Science Fiction Network.
We are Monorats.
We are One Accord Level 2 Podcast.
This is Jesse from Sudden But Inevitable and Open Pike Night.
This is sci-fi.
And on this segment, we actually take the opportunity to feature our the hashtag. And although we created this hashtag, I don't really want to call it our own, because the whole idea is to join together the sci-fi lovers, sci-fi creators. So if you are a creator of any kind, or if you are a fan of sci-fi, I invite you to follow, number one, that hashtag and post. So if you're a creator, obviously, we want you to post your content that is sci-fi related. If you're a fan, we want you to post your love for sci-fi. What is the sci-fi IP or sci-fi thing that you love the most? Because the whole idea to the hashtag is to bring everyone together. It doesn't matter how mainstream that one thing you love in sci-fi is. You'll be surprised how many people out there are not aware that they might be aware of the content. They might be aware because it is mainstream, but they might not be interested enough to give it a chance. And I've seen many, many different instances where, especially on a mainstream, and you figure, okay, this is mainstream. Everybody knows about it. You don't bother posting. You don't bother giving your point, your opinions on that IP. Then you'll be missing out. Someone else out there will be missing out. And I see many cases where people are actually seeing the passion that someone has for a specific sci-fi IP or anything, and they felt compelled to give it a chance after, it could be 40, 50 years of that IP might have been in in the airwaves. So do you want to actually do a favor to everyone out there that follow sci-fi? The whole idea is to share the love. We want to share what we love the most. I consider myself lucky enough that I love everything about sci-fi. So if I have not talked about a specific IP or a specific story, is maybe because I haven't had a chance to get around it. Point in case is, and if you're watching YouTube, you know why I'm laughing. I'm not going to say a thing for all of you listening to the podcast. I love it. And I am completely out of time. I left that for what I was saying already. Oh my God, this is classic. Yeah, no point intended. So
Classic. We're talking about this is sci-fi.
Yeah, share your love. Share your love. If I haven't spoken about it, it's because I have not been exposed for X reason. I mean, the reason could be in most cases, it's actually on my list of things to watch, and I haven't gotten around it. Hashtag Babylon 5.
Hashtag make Robert watch Babylon 5.
After he gets through all of Star Trek, all 50 something years.
Honestly, after he put us through this one, I want to make him watch Babylon 5 now. It's gonna be.
So this movie is
if we could watch this Babylon 5.
This is a perfect case scenario for what I'm saying. I had never seen Metropolis ever. This movie has been on my list forever since I ever have been aware of. I mean, most of us are aware of this film because the imagery has been posted or recycled in other things. But most likely, you are not really going to know where this actually is from unless you follow sci-fi. So this one over here is one of the perfect examples that I haven't gotten around it yet. But
no, you have. We're doing the pod. You have.
Awesome. Okay, so and another thing that I gotta say is, you want to the hashtag is not the only venue that you have to reach to us as well, because we do go through the hashtag and engage with the conversation. But you can also call our hotline. The number is 1-305-563-6334. And leave us a voicemail. You can leave a voicemail about the content of this episode, any other episodes we have done, or you can leave a message for me and say, hey, Robert, why you haven't done that thing that is in your wait list for a long time and do an episode on it, or a message for any of our hosts. You get to leave a message for our resident mad scientist or Captain Chaos. You can also reach out to us on Discord. We have a Discord channel we're trying to grow. And again, it might have our name on it, but the whole idea is behind that is the same idea that was behind it. This is sci-fi hashtag. It is to kind of join up with all the IPs and all the different sci-fi contents that we love. And you'll be surprised how when you go and join up, if you go to the rules channel, you actually pick your flavor, and there's going to be quite a lot of stuff in there where you can just pick what you want, and then that channel becomes available for you to share your love for that particular IP. And if you find one that is not,
trust me, guys,
let us know. I'll add it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I bet you're gonna find more flavors that you'll find in the Chinese buffet.
Yeah, there's quite a lot there. There's quite a lot there. Gio, should we go in for your segment?
Shoutouts.
Well, wait up, man. We gotta go into
we gotta go in
character.
Gotta do
we're gonna have in style. But I mean, for these shout outs, actually, we're gonna have some good supporters of us of all time. They are always in our inner circle, always interacting with us, making new conversation points. I'm gonna start by Robopulp. So go ahead and check at Robopulp. James Walton, actually. James Walton always is giving us support, always making great conversation points. You can find James Walton and go ahead and check his comic book. It's amazing. Stagnant Waters. And you can find him at James W. D. Writer. Go and check him out. He is the writer, boys. Next but not least, Kelly Sensiorgi. Love Kelly, man. Kelly's always making great topic conversations too. Always engaging with us in conversation and sharing the love. You can find Kelly's Twitter, actually, at Antipodal. Next, another big supporter of us and the people we want to be like when we grow up, the FFS Podcast.
There you go.
So go ahead and check them out. They are major leagues on YouTube. They got great content. A lot of people, part of the great community that makes content for us in sci-fi community. Go and check them out at FSF Podcast. And next one, we got Steve Horizon, Brave Ghost World. And you can find Steve also at My Ghost World. That's his Twitter tag. Always also making great conversation. And another one that we want to mention is Go Real. And you can find him at The Real Goril at Twitter. Also always giving support and sharing the love. We appreciate it. Also, we want to mention that we are working with Fanfare. You should go and check out their service. They're fantastic. They are very useful if you have any kind of content creation that requires scripting and making even audio shorts out of it. You can find it there. They are fantastic service. And also, to end up this section, I want to remind everybody that we are members of the Blind Knowledge Network. So go ahead and check them out. They have a great variety of content creators. The Blind Knowledge Network have podcasts, streamers, anything that you might like. I'm sure you can find it there. So go to the blindknowledge.com. They are also in Instagram, Twitter. You can find them there, and you can actually see there everything that they have on their radio creator. They are always growing every day. And that will be it for this today.
Awesome.
Nice.
Awesome. Yeah, I would have to say, going back to Fanfare, I've been playing around with their tools, and it's really cool. I really like it. So you guys should check it out. Okay, so I don't know. Are we ready for this? Because
just before we leap into the movie, I just wanted to make mention of the efforts that you've been putting in to the layout of the video, and I just have one thing that I wanted to say about the background graphic.
The possibility of successfully navigating an asteroid field is approximately 3,720 to
1.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it kind of feels like that, right?
Yeah, I was like,
oh man, this is amazing. I hope you guys enjoy it.
If you haven't taken the hint, listeners, please check out the YouTube channel, like and subscribe. That'd be great.
Awesome. Okay, so I was gonna say, are we ready? Considering this is a silent movie, I mean, it could be, 1 hour of
Here for a couple of hours, man.
Huh?
Yeah, I'm ready for that.
It's gonna be, it's gonna be a whole hour of nothing but silence.
I don't know if I can type up the speech cards quick enough.
Oh my God, that's amazing. For all of you out there who are not actually watching our YouTube, Ray is actually posting some text, which I'm not going to say, That's for you guys to go into YouTube and find out. But it is in the manner of this movie. So if you're aware or not aware, the silent movies typically had captions, like letters or text, a block of text after a scene to kind of guide the audience into what's going on. Although you already know what's going on because of the expressions and what they're doing, but it kind of helps. And they usually play a live orchestra or on the movie theater, which would be a really nice experience if I say so. Have any of we haven't? I don't think I have ever experienced live music on a. You have?
Yeah. There's a really old cinema called the Cremorne Orpheum, which is in northern Sydney, and I actually went there, and I can't remember what the movie was, but the thing that really blew my mind was when they started playing the silent movie. And I mean, this is an old cinema with the seats with the like carved wooden armrests and the red velvet seating.
Nice.
And it was just amazing that the restoration that they'd done on it. And the seats fold up and you push the seat down, you sit on it. And then the sort of the lights went down, and then there were spotlights, and there's this sort of circular area at the front of the stage. There's like this circle cut in the floor, and then the circle went down and slid aside, and then up through that hole spun an organ with a guy playing it.
Oh, wow.
And he's there playing the organ to the silent movie. And I was just like, wow.
That must be an experience. I know I have never experienced that. And I have a feeling I completely going to miss out because this is not something that is mainstream.
Yeah.
At least not anymore. But it is definitely an experience that I envy. Well, if there's one thing to envy is it would be that for me.
I don't know if it was correct or not, but I just had this idea of seeing the movie Alien as a silent movie, and they have one of these cards come up that says hiss as the alien attacks.
That would be awesome. That would be awesome. Ray, do we have the silent plot?
So that could be a lot of typing, dude. I'll just display the wiki page and we're done. Yeah, that's good. We're good.
Well, we can all be quiet, right? And
fair enough.
And wait for about maybe 10 minutes and then start talking again.
Yeah, and then that's the plot.
Yeah,
we just go. That was an amazing plot. I mean, it was oh, how silly. Anyway, the plot.
Dun, dun, dun.
I need to smoke a few packs of cigarettes a day and drink a whole bunch of bourbon so that I can get that voice right. You have to have the silly Aussie equivalent. In the future, wealthy industrialists and business magnates and their top employees reign over the city. Thank you, Gia. Reign over the city of Metropolis from colossal skyscrapers where underground dwelling workers toil to operate the great machines that power it. John Fredderson is the city master. His son, Fredderson. Yeah, awesome naming, guys. Idles away his time at sports in a pleasure garden, but is interrupted by the arrival of a young woman named Maria, who has brought a group of workers' children to witness the lifestyle of their rich brothers. Maria and the children are ushered away, but Fredda becomes fascinated by her and goes to the lower levels to find her. In the machine halls, he witnesses the explosion of a huge machine that kills and injures numerous workers. Fredda has a hallucination that the machine is a temple of Moloch and the workers are being fed to it. When the hallucination ends, he sees the dead workers being carried away on stretchers. He hurries to tell his father about the accident. Grot, the foreman of the heart machine, brings Fredderson secret maps found on the dead workers. Fredderson fires his assistant Josephat for not being the first to bring him details about the explosion or the maps. After seeing his father's cold indifference toward the harsh conditions faced by the workers, Freda secretly rebels against him by deciding to help the workers. He enlists Joseph's assistance in return and returns to the machine halls, where he trades places with a worker who has collapsed from exhaustion. Fredison takes the maps to the inventor Rotwag and learns their meaning. Rotwag has been in love with a woman named Hel, who left him to marry Fredison and later died giving birth to Freda. Rotwag shows Freda a robot he has built to resurrect Hel. The map shows a network of catacombs beneath Metropolis, and the two men go to investigate. They eavesdrop on gathering workers, including Freda. Maria addresses them, prophesizing the arrival of a mediator who can bring the working and ruling classes together. Freda believes that he can fill the role and declares his love for Maria. Fredison orders Rotwag to give Maria's likeness to the robot so that it can discredit her amongst the workers, but is unaware that Rotwag plans to use the robot to destroy Metropolis and ruin both Fredison and Freda. He's a bit pissed with them. Rotwag kidnaps Maria, transfers her likeness to the robot, and then sends the robot to Fredison. Freda finds the two embracing and believing that it is the real Maria, falls into a prolonged delirium. Intercut with his hallucinations, the false Maria unleashes chaos throughout Metropolis, driving men to murder and stirring dissent amongst the workers. Freda recovers and returns to the catacombs, accompanied by Josephat. Finding the false Maria urging the workers to rise up and destroy the machines, he accuses her of not being the real Maria. The workers follow the false Maria from their city to the machine halls, leaving their children behind. They destroy the machines, triggering a flood in their city deep underground. The real Maria, having escaped from Rotwag's house, rescues the children with the help of Freda and Josephat. Grot berates the celebrating workers for abandoning their children in the flooded city. Believing their children to be dead, the hysterical workers capture the false Maria and go to burn her at the stake. A horrified Freda watches, not understanding the deception until the fire reveals her to be the robot. Rotwag becomes delusional, seeing the real Maria as he's lost Hel, and chases her to the roof of the cathedral, pursued by Freda. The two men fight as Fredison and the workers watch on from the street, and Rotwag falls to his death. Freda fulfills his role as mediator by linking the hands of Fredison and Grot to bring them together. Roll credits. Now, of course, that is the full plot of the full movie. This poor movie has had so many cuts made of it, and they're all different lengths. So we've got the original runtime of 153 minutes. So it's quite a long movie. In fact, if you want to watch this, it's on YouTube. But I recommended watching it at 1.5 times because it basically gives everybody a bit of a pep in their step, and they're not dawdling quite as much. So that's how I watched it, and I think it actually improved a little bit. So 153 minutes for the original. Then there was an edit in 1927 at 116 minutes. They chopped a fair bit out of it. And then there was the US edit in 1927, which was 105 to 107 minutes. Now, thanks to Minty, who's a Melbourne guy who does all these, facts behind the movies, and he's great. I highly recommend his YouTube channel. He was saying that US cut was a completely revised edition, which had a different story. And basically, rather than having the workers as the downtrodden and unappreciated lot that they were in the original, had them as the selfish people rising up and ruining everything. So basically, when it got to America, they revised it because it didn't suit their sensibilities. They didn't want the rich industrialists to look like bad guys because they were rich industrialists. So they basically turned it around and made it look like the proletariats were the bad guys. So, yeah, correct. So there was another 128 minute.
Much Marxism.
It's the power of money, dude. 1927, there was a 128-minute cut made for the UK. So these are all down from the 153-minute original runtime. There was a 118-minute cut in August of 1927. Then in 1936, there was a 91-minute cut. So that cut out, over an hour of footage, which is significant.
It's crazy because this movie is 2 hours and a half.
Yeah. And then in 1984, there was an 83-minute cut. God knows how that turned out because half the movie's missing. Like, Jesus, it's like the Cliff Notes version.
At this point, they should have just done a miniseries.
And and then there was the 2001 version, which was 124 minutes long. So they added a bit back in. But obviously that 153-minute version was actually lost because it had been cut up so much. And there were scenes that were completely missing. And it wasn't until 2008, I think, that they found a full version of the movie in Buenos Aires, a full cut of the 153 minutes. But part of it was so badly degraded, because obviously it was on celluloid, and celluloid doesn't last that well, that there was actually several scenes that were so badly damaged they couldn't resurrect them. So when you watch on YouTube the 150, well, it's slightly less than 153 minutes, because they put title cards up explaining the scene that was destroyed. So it just tells you what happens rather than shows you.
You could actually see from scene to scene. This is something very interesting, that when you're watching a scene that is a similar scene, and you know how you may cut to one scene and then go back to that scene, you'll see how one is clean, right? Well, as clean as it could be. And then they go back to another scene and then come back to that scene, and now it's like dirty.
Yeah, it's all scratchy.
They couldn't clean it up.
So dirty.
Because those scenes that they added back in were of a lower quality than the original that they had to start with. So the best you can see is 148 minutes of the 153, because some of the scenes were lost, but they are described. And they actually went back to the original censorship logs of the original censorship from 153 down to 116 in Germany, and then translated those censor logs to get the correct cue cards in English for the English version in 2010. So they did a lot of work on this movie. They really worked to put it back together again. And it just seems like there was a lot of people out there who thought they knew better than the original creator, which I find downright insulting for the original creator.
Oh, yeah.
Especially what the Americans did to it. Sorry, guys, you are asses.
It's true. It's true. Murica.
Well, one thing that I want to point out is the fact that in the 1900s, and we already covered one of the a movie that has been done in the 1900s, and we already know it was like 15 minutes. So the typical length of a movie was 15 minutes. That's how it's always been. And then in 1913, there was a movie, and I know I'm going to destroy the name. It's Quo Vadis.
Quo Vadis.
Quo Vadis.
That's Roman.
I'm sorry?
It's a Roman statement. Quo Vadis.
So this movie was a 2-hour epic. And it wasn't just considered long. It wasn't considered long, right? It also had a blockbuster ambition. So the other filmmakers saw this and saw how not sure exactly if it was just a success of the venue to provide more content, which, to be honest with you, it doesn't matter, the length of the content as long as it's told the right way. But apparently this movie changed movies going forward. So this movie is the reason why we have 2 hour long movies or longer today.
Well, it's the sort of epic blockbuster that's got a huge scope that it sort of set the bar for those sort of movies, like the big Roman epics and the war epics, and like Lord of the Rings and all those sorts of big epic, huge scale movies or series of movies in Lord of the Rings case. By the way, Quo Vadis means where are you going in Latin.
Nice. So this movie was not only very, very influential in the sci-fi arena, but in all movies, Hollywood including, going forward. There's a lot of basically this is where, and it was kind of funny because we had a conversation, me and Gio, earlier about this movie, and where he said this is probably the movie that you would have to see when you go to film school. It is that influential. It is that influential. So
hey, Minty also informed me that it took a year of filming because Fritz Langer was very he was a perfectionist, so he wanted to get the perfect shot for every scene, and there was suggestions that there was quite large numbers of extras, like thousands of extras, but apparently they that was a bit of sort of a beat up, because Fritz in the 70s had an interview and he said that there was only about 300 extras.
Wow.
But they were trying to make it sound more epic by saying that there was thousands of extras. And I do actually remember that in advertising for, it was a Roman epic, was it was it Spartacus, maybe back in the 50s? It was a cast of thousands, because that made it sound more epic. So yeah, I'm not surprised that they tried to do that. But there was some of the stuff that went on during the filming of this movie. Apparently the robot suit was dangerous. It caused dehydration for Bridget Helm, and it was made of a thing called plastiwood, which I don't think that exists anymore. But she got bitten by the suit when she was walking around in it. It caused lacerations and bruising to actually wear it.
Shit.
Before you continue, I'm sorry to interrupt. For all of you out actually watching our YouTube video, I'm actually posting a video where she is getting a glass of water, and there's a guy in the back providing ventilation for the suit.
But yeah, it's pretty harsh role wearing that thing. In the flooding scenes near the end of the movie, it took them a month to film all those flooding scenes. And for realism, Fritz Langer insisted that the water be freezing. So everybody was standing around in freezing water day in, day out for a month.
Wow.
The guy was cruel. I mean, he was sitting up there in his little director's chair up on a podium.
The poor extras.
Yeah. And apparently all the kids.
Well, they ran from the water. I promise you that.
Yeah. All the kids standing around in that water were from the poorest parts of Berlin. They were earning their small change for their extra parts. I tell you.
Well, it made it very real. They're running away from the water for a reason.
Real terror.
Yeah,
real shivering.
This movie.
Real hypothermia.
Oh yes. Oh yes. And it makes me wonder, when did they film this? Hopefully it's not like on cold weather or something close enough. Hopefully it was a summer, but I just have to point this out, right? This movie because you hear me talk about how influential this movie was overall in Hollywood, right? I think this movie helped pave the way on how we see um, stars being portrayed in film, especially in the golden age of film. But the way that this movie presented sci-fi was very profound. It the way that it filmed, the futuristic setting, the use of special effects, which was really shocking to me. Like let me put one example of one of the scenes. I mean, there's a couple that I can point out here, and for all of you actually watching our YouTube channel, you'll be able to see what I'm displaying. But the use of special effects was really cool to me. Uh, I'm looking at this. It's basically the scene where Maria the robot is sitting on whatever that was, seat or pedestal.
Well, she was the machine person at that point.
Yeah, and
she became Maria after the transfer.
This is when they're transferring Maria's face onto her, and I'm also showing a picture. This is one of the images that I said that you might not be aware of the movie, but you've probably seen this somewhere. This actually pops up very well, and that's how influential it is. And the way that they designed the props in this thing, it made it look very, like, I had to remind myself this was a 1927 film based on this. So in this scene, Maria is actually inside the machine and is somehow transferring her likeness into the robot. So you see these volts going in through the cable and then moving on to wherever the robot was at. And then you see these rings of energy moving up and down across. And I don't know about you guys, but I found this really, really interesting, that and questioned myself on how this was done in 1927, considering there's no computers to do this.
I can just imagine saying, Robert, this is a movie. Robert, this is a movie.
Robert, this is 1927. This is 1927. That's what I keep on saying to myself. So why am I saying?
Freak out.
Why am I saying this? Is the fact that this movie was actually quoted as being an influence to films like Blade Runner, The Terminator, and The Matrix.
And Star Wars, hello, they pretty much copied the robot into C-3PO.
I mean, this is just 3 examples, but it is so influential that I find it hard to believe that there's one sci-fi IP out there that hasn't borrowed something from this movie. It's
for sure.
Wide. And another thing and I don't know if you guys noticed this, another thing that I found very interesting is this movie was filmed in 1927, right? So in this movie, they're showing the audience back in 1927 how the future would be like in 2026. That's 3 years away.
There's some conjecture about whether or not there is actually a time period. According to the book which Fritz Langer's wife wrote with him, it is not in a set time period. I mean, people have said it's 2100. Other people said 2026, but the writers of the novel basically said no, it's not set in a particular time period. It's much like a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. It's an unquoted future.
Well, the reason why I'm bringing that up, the actual year doesn't really matter to what I'm going to say, but it fascinates me, and I think this is a great thing about sci-fi, regardless of when that story has been created. We have tons of examples. For example, that book that we have to do an episode about, for the very first sci-fi story ever written. It was in the year 200. 200. The year 200. But the vision of the people who created this content, they are showing how the future would look like in their eyes. And you see this, and again, this, I could see this in Blade Runner, you know, those epic buildings and how you're flying through at the beginning of Blade Runner. Granted, there in this films, there's a combination of paintings and sets, this, you know, like small models that they use to actually create those buildings. But the way that they portrayed the future from fashion, you see streets at different levels, which I imagine it depends on what level, what societal level you belong to. So there, you see the bottom ones resemble more like you know, those very congested roads that we see today at 5 o'clock, which also is really interesting because in 1927 you don't have the amount of cars in the streets that we have now. So right there, the vision is it's just mind-boggling to me that someone had the vision to see this. And then you see the roads up a little bit higher up in the buildings. There resembles what Hyperloop would look like if it was above ground. And then one of the things that I find really interesting, that I guess the vision fell, or they didn't have vision to see this long enough. Where you see the flying cars, they're actually planes doing this unplainly maneuvers.
Yes.
So let me explain what I'm saying in this. Typically, planes have a specific way that they turn, they climb.
They tilt.
Exactly.
They don't turn on a dime.
These planes, they look like your typical 1927 planes, number one. And they just turn right. They just turned right.
They were biplanes.
Yes. Which was really interesting because you go from all the way from the vision to very realistic vision of what a highway today would look like on a busy day, to what an unrealistic flying car that looks exactly like a biplane of the era. What do you guys think about that?
Can I add to that a little bit? So road congestion is not a new thing. Even before automobiles were invented, in busy cities, you would have lineups of horse-drawn vehicles. You'd have traffic jams with horses, basically, because there'd be so many carriages and so many people. And, you know, they didn't have...
Horse jams.
Horse jams, yeah. But they didn't have everything.
You imagine the smell of the emission?
Mm-hmm. It smelled like shit. But you'd have gutters. Like today, we've got gutters and road edgings and barriers and all this sort of stuff set up so that everything is compartmentalized for safety. But they didn't have that back in those days. Everything just mishmashed together. It was a huge mess, right? Yeah. Think kind of like how some parts of India are today, with ridiculous overcrowding and people on bicycles and motorcycles and everything going every which way. It was like that, but with horses, right? And carriages. So road congestion isn't something new. But what they had to think about was, well, how's it going to be with automobiles and how's it going to be in the future? So some of their future vision and some of their extrapolation into the future was quite accurate with, you know, like overpasses and all that sort of thing. And they but their modeling of planes, obviously the guy wasn't a plane freak who did that, because the thing just went and yeah, I saw that too. That threw me pretty bad.
Planes back then didn't behave that way either. So
but a lot of what they were using, and in 1926, 27, it was all very new, was Art Deco. There was a lot of Art Deco in this movie, including the design of the Babel building was very Art Deco. And that was like Art Deco really became a thing in the 30s. So in 26, 27, 26 when they were making it, 27 when it was released, this is really new, cutting edge architectural design, and they were using it in this movie. So Fritz was really trying to bring the future, both short-term and long-term, into the design of this movie. So he'd really thought really hard about it, and being a perfectionist, he wanted it to be spot on. But obviously there was things that they didn't get right, which is understandable. I mean, there was this series of portraits made in the 1900 for the 1900 science exhibition. You know how they had the big exhibitions in Europe in the late 1800s and the 1900s. They said, what is life going to be like in 100 years? And they had all these interesting drawings. I'll have to look them up and shoot them over to you. I can't remember all the exact details, but I do remember the gist of it. And it was that they're all wearing three-piece suits and big fluffy dresses of the time, but they were on flying bicycles and all this sort of other stuff, which is totally like, some of the stuff they got was really interesting and it looked really futuristic, but their sensibilities...
We almost got flying bicycles.
Almost. But their sensibilities as like fashion and things like that, they couldn't think in that phase forward, so they left it as it was. So you had people dressed in three-piece suits with bowler hats and top hats around flying bicycles.
Let me add to that. What do you guys thought about the fashion, the women's fashion in this movie? I get the feeling, and I'm going to say this, and I want to hear your thoughts on that, but I get the feeling that obviously this movie is a product of its time, 1927. Yeah. But I get a feeling that everything was designed by and for men. At least that aspect. I'm not saying the movie. I'm just saying on that aspect of fashion, because you're saying the guys in the three-piece suit, which is not necessarily what the future is going to be like. But ladies' fashions were wild.
Perhaps.
Well, let's just say that they were going for peak Roaring Twenties frippery, basically, to borrow a word. But the clothing was sort of extrapolated even further from the fashions of the Roaring Twenties, and they tried to go even further with it, rather than thinking fashion is going to change and we'll come up with something completely different. They just pushed what they had to 11. And that whole scene where all the women were wearing the fancy clothes was basically girls or women being now it's a bit of a rough word. I'm just trying to remember what it was.
Bring it.
I'm just trying to remember what it is.
Objectify.
But basically they were being God, I wish the word would come to me.
Well,
they were basically being set up so that they would attract the rich young man who was the son of the leader of the city. Basically, but groomed. That's the word I was looking for. They were specifically being groomed to appeal to him.
And let me paint a picture for all of you out there, especially our listeners, because I'm not showing a video. I'm not showing a picture of this. I wish I could, because that was really interesting. But the skirts kind of remind me of a altered skirt that you would use like in the 1600s. Typically those are big round things.
Yeah, you can recreate that by putting an umbrella under your skirt.
I'm sorry?
You can recreate that by putting an umbrella under your skirt.
Yeah, but I mean, these were not umbrellas, right? I'm pointing this out to bring a context to what I'm going to say, so you can envision, because most likely most of us have seen period dramas where there's the big dresses. Now imagine these dresses are just big on the side, so it's kind of hard for me to explain. They just fold in the front and in the back. They're not big as they are for the typical dresses, but they're big on the right and the left. However, the blouse that they're wearing is see-through. So, and not just see-through, it's completely open in the back. So you see the entire back of the ladies. And when they turn around, you can actually see everything in the front. So that's the reason why I was saying, you know, this movie was actually, I guess, the visuals on that aspect, on the fashion aspect, was designed by men. What do you guys think about that? That's what I wanted to bring up. It's just the fashion. You know, you see the man 3-piece suit, unless you see the workers, right? The workers are completely different because there you go. So the workers, they all blend together, man and female. But that's a completely different point on this movie when we're talking about the separation of classes, right? For all of you actually,
and when we're looking at ladies,
oh my god. Okay, so if you're watching, moving on, if you're watching our video on YouTube, you can see an image of what that dress would look like. So what do you guys thought about that? I mean, I find that really interesting when I was watching this film.
Well, the workers weren't allowed to have any individuality. They all had to prescribe to, you know, the 10-hour shifts, and they weren't supposed to vary. They were all supposed to go and do their jobs and come back and have no individuality. In fact, they all had the same colored clothing. They all had the same type of clothing, and they were all given berets with a name and a number on it. So they were all basically stamped with a number to recognize them. So you could just read the number off their beret and know who it was. And I don't know if that's a particularly German thing, like liking to assign numbers to people. But you know, people who are considered lower class or of less worth tend to just become numbers and become cogs in the machine. And that's sort of, I think that's the sort of angle that Fritz was going for, that the workers meant nothing, and it was the rich people who were the ones that got to be individuals and you know, have nice things.
I think that's actually a particular thing when it comes to companies, which in this film, this is what we see. It's this huge company, and they're using the workers to build the city. I think this is unique to companies. If you ever work for a company, you're probably very familiar with an ID or a number that is given to an employee, typically called, you know, sometimes it's employee ID. And most companies today, because of all the stuff that is going on out there, and not necessarily today, but I've seen some of the companies have actually started moving away from trying to see this, you know, the individuals. And I can't point out a year when this has happened, but it's been a long time where they're. I think if I really recall, I want to say maybe late 80s is when I started to see a change on this. But it is very easy for a company to, you know, and this is why you have to make an effort to actually see people as numbers, because that's, you know, that's how you identify them, especially for payroll. But in this film, I think, you know, back in the 20s, I like to think that this was true for every company. When you have, especially all on a factory, where you have people, and since they are, you know, this is employee 1, this is employee 2, this is employee 3. So you see them as numbers, because especially in this movie, all you wanted was the end results and how much profit is the company making. What do you guys think about that? I'm just my personal view on what I feel was the reason or behind that displaying of numbers.
Well, I can tell you by my own experience, if you think of it, uh, nowadays that's kind of frowned upon, doesn't look attractive, the ID thing. So they call it corporate DNA. Make it look more appealing and attractive. People feel more pumped about it.
Spin it.
And we covered actually, yeah, you seen it?
No, they spin it. They try and make it sound better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, of course, and they try to bring all the products that you could do for life use with the stamp of the company on it. So they can incorporate more that company into your daily life. Cups that you use for coffee, shirts or glasses, anything. But if you think about it too, it reminds me a lot when I look at this to Equilibrium movie.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
because that's the same reality they live in. Like there's no individuality, or Gattaca.
The beginning of
there's no individuality.
Joe versus Volcano. The beginning of that movie.
That's what I see.
Oh, by the way, Robert, there's your dress with the wings on the skirt.
Those are really, they're really, really interesting to me. It's kind of, yeah, you put it perfectly. They look like wings that just, that's just falls down on the side.
Better push it on the balcony. Go fly.
All right.
Oh, wow. Nice. So I usually ask around this time in the podcast, how old were you when you saw this movie first?
I was today years old.
Yes. I think
that's
we're
the
all
same
right?
for all of us, I think.
It's the same for all of us.
Yeah.
I guess let me start with a question, with the answer to this question, and then you guys can move on and give your opinions. I saw it basically between yesterday and today, and it was shocking to me, and very exciting to me to see, because this was kind of like granted, this is not reality of 1927. This is a science fiction film, but it's really interesting to me because to me it's like a time capsule. It's a window into an era that I could never even imagine what it would look like, and I can see through the visions that I'm seeing, I can see how the era was like. Comments like what I mentioned with the fashion, the topics discussed in the film, and that all those, whenever I see a film like this, it's always exciting to me because how I feel about, this would be the only time that I can kind of time travel, if you want to call it that, and see what that era was like through the interpretations of what these people that created this film see the future to be like. What do you guys? I guess you can go and move on. I know we all seen this movie today, but what was your basically first impressions?
Well, I'm gonna tell you, I think that Ray is gonna agree with me on this one. It doesn't cease to amaze me how all movies try to portray the future. They get many things close, but never right. And then the actual things that are like way out of the picture, no, we're not going that direction. But it reflects also the technology and the vision of the time of what technology in the future was.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's just a shot of all the workers dressed the same.
That's the beginning of Joe versus Volcano.
Yeah. and freaking what's it called? Equilibrium. That's Equilibrium. People walking around.
Equilibrium.
Or even Gattaca. And the scenes of Gattaca when people are like making lines to job interview and things like that. The only difference is that here everybody looks the same. In Gattaca, they show you the divide of the valid and invalid individuals.
Yeah.
Here, everybody's valid. Yay!
Well, technically, if you think about, we're only watching the invalids in this scene. And
you
the
might
valids,
think
the
so,
valids
but the
will be
problem
these
is
people.
in Gattaca they give you the valids and invalids. That doesn't remove what they don't show you, the elite. And here is just invalids and the elite.
Oh yeah, you're
Then,
right.
You know,
That makes more sense.
you got the elite. You got in the valid individuals in Gattaca. They don't really show you that, but you still got that elite that is above the valid individuals in Gattaca. That
And
they
for-
didn't even went that deep on it.
For all of you out there listening, I invite you guys to download our season 1. We have done an episode on Gattaca. Great episode, by the way, very insightful. And we had an episode on Equilibrium as well. So I invite you guys to download those, and so you know exactly what we're talking about. So Ray, what we all know that you saw this today. What was your first impression?
Well, I'd seen snippets from this movie and various other bits in other things, like talking about the influences to Star Wars. Obviously, the machine person was a big influence on C-3PO. So I'd seen that before, and I knew of this movie, but I'd never actually gone out of my way to watch it. And while there was a lot to take in from this movie, it to me, it did drag a bit. Which is why I watched it at 1.5 times speed, because it's a product of its time. If you go back and watch anything from this sort of a time that is telling a complicated story, you'll obviously get there's story to be seen here, which is interesting, and that's why we can sit around and talk about it for a couple of hours. But also it kind of drags because the acting is not the sort of acting that you're used to. It's quite overacted. And that's obviously because it's a silent movie. You've got to portray more in movement than in speech, because there's no recorded speech. They don't throw up speech cards every 5 seconds, except in really key points where there's a back and a forth to decide, the main point of the story or something like that. Otherwise, you'll see them talking and you can almost lip read what they're saying. But they'll wait for like 20 seconds to throw up a card, and it's just the main statement of the conversation. It's not the entire conversation. So there's a lot you've got to sort of try and take from the visual, because the audio just isn't there, and it's not something that moviegoers of today are used to. So it's a little bit harder to enjoy than, say, Star Wars or Battlestar Galactica or something like that. That's full FMV with full audio. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have anything to add. That there's a lot in here that's presented in the visuals, and Fritz Langer was very adamant about getting the perfect shot every time, which is why it took a whole year to film. And it went from 1.5 million Reichsmarks to 5 million as a budget, because he just blew the budget right out of the water, because he had to have it right. And I don't know where he got the extra money from, but he managed to get it.
Wow.
And basically, if you sit there and watch carefully, and you do have to watch carefully, and sometimes it's a little bit slow and you get distracted, you look away, you miss something. because
I gotta say that. I gotta add to that. Typically what I do is I actually watch movies while I eat, right? Because I enjoy, it's
you gotta look at your food,
right? I tried this movie and I had no idea what the heck was going on. I said to my wife, look, I'm turning this off. I'm going to finish eating and I'm going to sit down and watch it. And it was the very first time that I experienced something with a movie, something like this. I never experienced this before, where I had to be full on the movie.
Well, when we did Journey to the Moon, it was 15 minutes. You can sit there and watch something for 15 minutes without getting distracted. But when it's 2.5 hours of gluing your eyes to a screen so you don't miss something,
Yes.
And for me, it was less than that because I sped it up a bit. But sitting there and staring
the
at
smartest
something and
one,
not
man.
losing your attention. I mean, people of our age and Gio's age, we've got an attention span.
Yes.
But
we
the
do.
young ones today, not
No.
so much. They would have
No.
difficulty
They don't.
focusing on this for that long.
No,
They really would.
I would have to add though, and again, we're adding all our opinions here. I enjoyed it at normal speed, right? But that doesn't mean
You know what means TLDR?
but that doesn't mean that
You know what
that
means
would be-
TLDR? Too long didn't read.
I enjoyed
That's
it
for
at
today's people.
Yeah, I enjoyed it at normal speed. But we have an example here. Ray had to watch it at a fast speed. Gio, did you enjoy it at normal speed, or you rather have watched this at a faster speed?
I watch it at normal speed. Like I think I like to. I don't like missing details,
Okay.
so I watch it twice. I watch one and a half because I ate and then I got and I fell asleep, so I got back to it. But I watch it at normal speed that time and a half. When I put my head to it, I put my head 100% to it too. That's what I find myself being a little bit more like out of the box of what my generation is, because most people in my generation don't put attention to it either.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing.
Tell
I
you,
mean,
man, TLDR, too long
you
didn't
watch-
read.
You watch today's TV while doing something else, right? You watch a show
Brainless
and
TV.
you like doing something with your hands, or you're folding clothes, you're ironing, or you're doing something, and you're looking away every now and again. And when you look away, you follow the story through the audio, but there isn't any.
Yes.
So you can't do that. And I found myself drifting off now and again because I've got to sit there and watch the screen for, well, it was an hour and 3/4 because I'd sped it up. But, my mind would wander a little bit and suddenly I go, oh, crap, I've missed something. Because you've got to focus on the screen the entire time. And I would think even the people of the time, and that's why it got edited down so severely, was that they couldn't focus on it for that long.
Intermissions.
Yeah. I saw that, and you had to at that time. You had to have the intermissions. So you notice when it says the end of the prelude, that's probably at the time where they turned on the lights, people got up, stretched their legs. Because just remember, I mean, movie and this is
go get
right?
popcorn.
So from 1913 to 1927, movies were already 2 hour long. So you had to kind of like get people to stand up and exactly like Gio said, go get something to eat. I don't know exactly what was done at that time, but there's some sort of break, and it seems like there was 2 breaks in this movie.
Yeah, there was.
I can add up that the normal the day, because you got theater too. They would do these also in theaters too, to give a break to the actors too and the performers. So he kind of migrated over to filmmaking. If you think about it, when you were talking about a long movie.
Yeah.
Well, I remember going to see Ben-Hur, and this was back in the 90s, so it was a while back. But, Ben-Hur was made in the 50s, but it was a very long movie, and it had an intermission built into it in the middle.
Yeah.
Like the story sort of, the first part of the story, and then he ends up as a slave, and then it goes into intermission, and then the second part of the story, he's a slave and builds his way up into the chariot racing. So, they built it into the story, and they built it into this story to have breaks as well.
Yeah.
Specifically put in there.
Yeah.
And I think that Fritz Langer put those breaks in there because he knew it was hard to focus on something for that long.
Yeah.
And you didn't have the opportunity at YouTube to speed it up a bit. So you had to sit there and watch it in normal speed the whole time.
Yeah. I like to think
For the record.
Go ahead.
You go, Robert. You go, Robert.
I was going to say just quickly, I like to think that there's very little time. Let me put this comparison in there to see what you guys think. Movies prior to 1913 were 15 minutes long. All of a sudden, they're 2 hours. So from 13 to 27, it's a little bit over 10 years only. That's very short span. of time. So I like to think that people were still on the fence. Most people weren't watching a movie for so long, and why they had to do the intermissions. Now, fast forward to 2023, where we can have a movie very easily being 3 hours long, and we're sitting down, not stopping and watching that movie, only because we have since 1913, which it's over 100 years of training people that when you go to the movie, it's going to be at least 2 hours. So I don't know. There's something that I was thinking when I saw that maybe that's why we see intermissions being more of a normal thing back in that age, in that decade.
It's got to do with the width and breadth of the storytelling, I think. If you're doing something, light and fluffy, like a rom-com or something, it'll be like 90 minutes, 93 minutes, something like that. And it's also got to do with how many sessions they can fit in a day at the cinema. From my personal experience with Alita Battle Angel, the original script was supposed to be 2.5 hours. And they said, no, you got to cut it back to 2 hours so that we can get more sessions in a day. And that's why the budget was reduced and it was cut down, specifically because they wanted it at that 2 hour mark. So you had time at the beginning for the ads and time for cleaning up between the sessions. So it would take 2.5 hours total to go through one cycle of the movie. Otherwise, it would be 3 hours total. And then you get less sessions in a day, you make less money. So it's all got to do with how long the session is and how much money you're going to make and how many people you think are going to go and see it and how many cinemas it's going to. So there's a whole economics of the length of a movie and how that's going to impact the showing of the movie. So by going from 15 minutes to 2 hours, you've brought the amount of storytelling that you can do up significantly. But you've also got to look at people's attention spans. And, of course, a silent movie, you've got to focus on it the whole time. You don't follow the movie. You can't look away. You can't have a long blink or anything and just listen. So you can't do that. And, of course, there's parts of this movie you wouldn't want to do that. I mean, for 1927, as you said, the special effects in the scene with the translating the look of the woman onto the machine person was fantastic for the time. There were parts of it that I looked at and chuckled. It's like, you're boiling some colored water over there, and how's that supposed to impact that? And he's just flicking switches and pulling dials. I don't see it having any impact in the situation, but okay. So from a scientific perspective, it's like some of this is superfluous, but the special effects were very well done for the time. I'm not sure how they did that.
Yeah.
I'd like to know. But I mean, they put a lot of effort into that scene to make it look very sci-fi, and I think they succeeded. Other parts of it felt like almost like a period piece with the haves and the have-nots, and the son of the noble discovering how bad everybody else has got it and wanting to do something about it because he's a nice guy, and realizing that he's been fopping around achieving nothing with his life because his father was ridiculously rich, and he falls in love with a woman who wants to do something about it and decides to take on her quest. It's a classic story that's been done millions of times probably, but putting it in using a sci-fi lens to tell it, and being one of the first times that they've put a sci-fi lens on a story like this to tell it, gives it a completely different angle. And I just wanted to ask you guys a question. How sci-fi do you feel this movie really is? I mean, obviously there's a robot which can have its look changed. So there was a doppelganger. And, big, vaguely futuristic city. But other than that, what other sci-fi elements was there? Did I miss something? Or was the sci-fi very much like, a seasoning rather than the main dish?
I think I'll go first on this one. I think that this movie, and this is something that I spoke to about this at the beginning, this movie has been very influential for movie making since then in all aspects of filmmaking and all genres of filmmaking. Obviously, many people call this influential in the sci-fi, and is being quoted as being an influence to many of the classic films. However, I feel that what made this movie the great movie that is for its time and the influential movie that it is the fact that it actually covers a wide gamut of different genres within. I feel that it's a sci-fi movie within many other genres in it because of the vision of the future, the vision of the city, the vision of not necessarily the robot and the equipment that was used to create, but just basically the city itself and its vision. However, the way it was portrayed, that was kind of like in the background, and I think it was necessary for the type of movie that it is. But that's just my thought. I know that Gio has a complete different opinion than that I do when it comes to that. So I don't know if you want to go next.
Yeah, go next.
No, I'll let Ray go.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, it kind of feels like the sci-fi is very much seasoning rather than the main dish. I'll use a sort of a simile to sort of get my point across. But if you look at movies like Lucy or other sort of AI,
Yes.
coming to life, kind of, because the robot in this is kind of pivotal to screwing up the storyline, as it were, thinking to be used by the guys running the city to gain control again of the people who might be attempting to riot. But then the scientist who has the grudge against Fredderson decides to use it to screw both Fredderson and Fredder, his son. So there's sort of multiple levels of this thing being used to screw around with other people.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't feel like the focus was on the science. It felt like the focus was on the social setting and how brittle it all was, and how inequality will try and right itself when people get too frustrated with it. So it was more a cautionary tale of social injustice than a sci-fi movie that focuses on technology running amok, or welcoming our new AI overlords, which a lot of people have been worried about with ChatGPT and
Bard
and Midjourney and things like that recently. So sort of bringing it back to that, this felt more like a social injustice cautionary tale sort of sci-fi, future warning sort of movie than it was a sort of a hard sci-fi sort of, oh wow, look at all our sci-fi technology, isn't it grand kind of movie, if you get what I mean.
Before Gio starts, I wonder, what do you feel about this movie being your typical utopia, and how utopias are typically part of the, used in the sci-fi genre?
Well, utopia is supposed to be something that, is good for everybody, but clearly it wasn't.
Yeah.
Like there was the small number of elites at the top that had everything, and everybody else just trudged around and had a horrible time and had no life. So I wouldn't necessarily call it a utopia. I think there's a term like a jutopia or something like that, where some people have it really good and everybody else has it shit, and that's more realistic. There has been ideas passed around through sci-fi aficionados that, if we can build enough machines that can do all the work for us, then we'll all get to sit around and do what we want and have a grand old time. But this isn't one of those. This is more the 1% has everything and everybody else has a shit time.
Yeah.
And there's no middle class. The middle class is gone.
Yeah.
There's the haves and the have-nots.
But
sorry, Gio. I know.
let me bring a question for.
That.
No, you're good. You're good. You're good. I actually have. I'm gonna second everything that Ray says because that's the truth. It doesn't really give you that much technology. It has more of a social political influence, and I mean that's totally normal. It reflects what's going on in the times if you think of it. It gives you more that futuristic feel on what society would look like, but it doesn't really touch much on like that sci-fi aspect. Now, what I was gonna leave the question to ask you both is, where have you seen, in which movie have you seen an utopia that is not really portraying a tyranny that is bound to fall?
Well, that's what I was saying, and why my comment on Utopia was because if you remember our movie Equilibrium, right? Granted, the villain in Equilibrium was a lot more of a villain than the villain in this movie, right? But I still consider the dad to be the villain. So I don't know.
Utopia in my mind is not sustainable, really.
Because it technically this is utopia for the rich. This is utopia for the mega powerful, and that's why
the elite.
Exactly, and that's why you have the working class, because there's no middle class on the ground. But it's just an observation. I mean, I might be wrong in what I'm saying. It's just what I feel, from my experience from watching this movie.
There is a movie that we need to do. Was it a movie? I think there was a movie version done of it, but it's actually a series, an anime series called Appleseed. I don't know if you guys know that one. It's from the 90s. I really think we do need to cover it after covering this one. But it has genetically engineered post-humans who were designed so that they could govern the rest of humanity fairly after a global war. And they built this massive city called Olympia, which is like a mega city, not some mega construct. And the idea was that, everybody would get to move there and be governed by these fair, unilateral, genetically engineered post-humans who, had all their selfish desires and jealousy and all that sort of stuff removed from them so that they could be fair and look after everybody. But it really wasn't necessarily working because there's terrorists who didn't believe that they should be controlled by artificial beings. And, there's always somebody who has to stuff things up. So, it's an interesting story. And, in that one, they were trying to create a utopia. But there's always somebody against it. There's always somebody who's got to push over the trolley and spill all the toys. So
I'm guessing that you like Appleseed too much because of this guy. Oh
no, Alita's not in Appleseed.
You never seen Appleseed?
Well, I'm saying here that Appleseed. Wow, I just read real quick what it is. A Japanese manga series written and illustrated by Masamune Shiro. The series follows the adventure of Eswat, a member of the Deunan Nut, and Braceros, headquartered in Olympus.
Well, we're gonna have to do an episode on it because I'm due over.
But they're genetically modified, which is not different.
Yeah, I'm due a rewatch. This was a great series.
Well, they've actually done a number of. I don't know if they were reboots, but they kind of feel like reboots. But there was a recent one, like 2013 or something. But I'm thinking about the original back in the 90s, which is the classic.
That's the one. That's the one.
But they're all sort of following the same rough trajectory, in as much as they're talking about, trying to make a utopia and being stymied by terrorists and people who've got their own agendas, or who don't want a utopia. They want a tyranny because they want to control everything. Utopias only work if everybody's on board, and you're never going to get everybody on board because somebody wants to be in control and push other people down and be a complete scumbag and arsewad. And what are you going to do? Shoot them?
They did say this in this movie. Not necessarily say, because there's no words, but they wanted to create the city. And I don't know if you remember that montage that they were using, where they had the head, right? And they had this vision, and they had no idea and I had no idea how to do it. So then they had to hire the hen to create that vision of the city they wanted to create for everyone.
Oh, that was the story of the Tower of Babel, and how the visionaries had the idea of a tower to reach the stars, but that idea didn't translate down to the hands, which were the people who were building it. And the people who were building it weren't on board with that ideology, and they got upset with how they were being treated and wrecked it. And that was a prophetic sort of story as to what was going to happen to the metropolis.
Yep. So, because that's basically what was happening, is Metropolis was built by the working class, but they were not enjoying it. So
they weren't allowed to. They were set up to just be part of the machinery.
Yep.
And you can't treat people like that. They won't put up with it.
Not so fun.
It was kind of interesting when the sun went down and found this guy and what appears to be a clock. This machinery, he had to move the arms to where the light comes on. That had a very big symbolism there, because for the story, for what was going on within the story, that was necessary. That was a machine that had a function and needed an operator. But for the person actually watching the scene, it's actually a message on how the company was abusing the working class. Because obviously, nowadays the whole idea of a machine, and I like to think that even back then, in real life, was to create something that makes it better, makes it easier for the company, right? Not necessarily for the worker, because it's all about the money. But in this case, it doesn't seem like it was very efficient. So I think that was that, and other machines that we see throughout this film was done in that manner, specifically to show the disparity and how the elite were abusing the working class. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, it felt like it was almost busy work.
It sounds, when you look at it, it seemed like it was just busy work. But for the story, it's a necessary part. It was a necessary machine, and they needed a necessary worker. And we know that because when the son goes to the guy, because he's collapsing from exhaustion, he said, someone has to be at the machine. And he said, don't worry, I'll be at the machine. Someone will be at the machine. Me. And for all of you out there who are actually watching our YouTube channel, we're actually showing an image of the scene that I'm talking about. So what do you guys think about that? That symbolism, that type of symbolism, I saw that throughout the entire movie.
I think it gave the hope to, although we're moving towards a future where that's not going to be the reality, that even when machines are predominant, humans are needed. Mm-hmm. That was the view of the time, if you think of it. But we're moving towards a future where machines are going to spawn machines, and they're going to suppress us as sentient beings. That's what we are creating. The so-called singularity.
there's a scene.
Eh?
So if you guys are watching the YouTube channel, you'll see a picture of the son actually grabbed the worker that was exhausted from working. And this is a scene
Could you imagine moving those hands around for 10 hours?
Yes.
That would be tiring. I mean, I don't think the guy even got any breaks. I think he just had to work for 10 hours straight.
Yeah.
Humanity. It's a human.
And you know,
that's the expectation too of you go.
You know, I was just going to say, this is one of the things that this film does well. It's a message of the dangers of inequality. It's still relevant today, which is really impressive of this film, you know, back in the 20s. And again, a testament for science fiction, because, you know, science fiction can be used to explore important issues. And that's what I always said about science fiction as being a thought experiment on many of the issues. And
thought experiment.
How can you find solutions? Sometimes not necessarily, you know, sometimes it explores an issue that is existing. And in the case of, you know, what Gattaca did for humanity. And in some cases, it's what's going on in what potential issues will come from that particular scenario. But I mean, we see this even from our favorite book, Gio, The Time Machine. If you read this book, when he goes all the way far into the future, he sees exactly what we see in this film. You have the lower class. I mean, not the lower class, because this just worker class. People underground. And they're the ones that in this book, they make the clothing, they make the food. And then you have the elite that are at the surface. They pretty much do nothing but eat and be clothed. So this is kind of like what we see in this film.
Funny thing, it's funny because in Time Machine, they don't portray the working class as a working class, if not a subdeveloped race that is predative upon the others. So it seems that I mean, they don't portray anything like the working class is giving any benefit to the other ones, but being a danger to them.
Yeah,
if you think about it, the underground people, the rat people, what they call it, the rat people was.
I think it was, yeah.
Or the white monkeys.
This is what the father in this in this movie was afraid of, that the people would rise up and you know, either take vengeance or just, you know,
revolution.
Yeah. So I just find that to be interesting, and that's why I have to bring it up. This is another example of a sci-fi film that uses that explores issues to show the danger of specific issues. Have you guys thought about that? I mean, I'm not sure if Ray, you know me and overthinking, so that's why I have to
Really? Never.
No, I can't believe it. I can't believe it.
Well, I mean, there's all sorts of levels in this movie. There's, you know, cautionary tales about science gone amok. There's cautionary tale about society becoming too stratified, and you know, we've got the whole thing with the 1% at the moment, which, you know, at least there's still a middle class, even though it's shrinking in the world at the moment. But yeah, it's a cautionary tale about, you know, having too many people, having a few people at the top with all the money and having everybody else as, you know, poor indentured workers. Scared the people are going to rise up eventually. They're going to get fed up with it, watching these people have, and that was something in the very start of the movie which I thought was like, oh, this is going to go poorly. When Maria walks in with all the kids and goes, these are our brothers, they've got all the shit, we've got nothing. You know, it's like, yeah, that's going to go down well. These kids are going to grow up hating them. It's almost like she was inciting rebellion. Although she was preaching, you know, love and good faith and, a mediator will come along and then it'll all get worked out. But not exactly, because you had a mad scientist, not my sort of mad scientist the other time, and you had the guy who was trying to run the place by stomping on everybody else.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. There was another cautionary tale there about not understanding other people's plights until you go through it yourself. And once,
yep,
you were
human nature.
You were now where is it? Oh, I've got too many windows open. So the quote, the written quote that you were suggesting about the Fredder saying, "And where are the people, Father, whose hands built your city?" And his father saying, "Where they belong, in the depths." He wasn't considering these other people. He thought they weren't worth his time, and he was at the top and should always be, and they were at the bottom. And then later on, when his son goes off and they think he's died, the father is distraught, thinking, "Oh my God, my child has died, and I've lost my heir." And there was the whole thing of the workers going off to destroy the machines and leaving their children down in the Undercity, which, if they'd thought about it for 5 seconds, they would have known that with the machine stopping, they would flood. Now, I thought that was quite prophetic as well, technologically speaking, because there's areas in most major cities that like subway tunnels and underground spaces and stuff that require 24/7 pumping to stop them from flooding. During earthquakes and things like that, you get a lot of flooding of underground areas because the pumps stop, and then everything gets flooded with groundwater. There have been times in New York City, as I understand it, where some of the lower subway lines have been flooded because the pumps had broken down.
Yeah.
So, without constant machinery dealing with the problem, you are going to get subterranean flooding. And that's what happened in this movie. They predicted that having a city underground would be dangerous if the machines ever stopped. The machines stopped and the place started flooding, and the kids were all going to drown because they'd been left there by their silly parents who went off to destroy the machines that were keeping their houses from flooding. It's like, yeah, you screwed that up.
What were the quote that the main guy, the headman, the head of the workers? Are you stupid? Don't you know that if you stop the machines, your children are going to die?
And then they all did the overacting.
Oh wow. Nice. Yeah, I just find it really interesting, and why I think I love sci-fi so much is that it's our playground, to explore on ideas and see how they turn out.
I mean, you can look at the robot Hell. I call her Hell because that's what the guy had initially designed her for, to replace the woman that he loved. That robot, you can sort of look at the people who are concerned about the helper robots that are being designed today to support aged people who they don't have enough people to look after. Sort of support and company robots that they're making in Japan, and people are worried about that, about fake people being produced and people getting confused about whether or not they're real people. The better the conversation AIs like ChatGPT get, the less able people, especially older people who are easily confused because of mental instabilities will get in being able to tell whether they're real or not. And that's something we covered in Humans episode 1. Remember the old guy who had the failing android who should have been recycled, but he didn't want to recycle him because he considered him his son?
Yeah.
It falls into that bucket as well. And the whole thing with the machine person being turned into this woman and using her to incite rebellion or, change the message of peace and reconciliation to one of uprising and rebellion, sort of falls into that whole gamut of replacing people with artificial people or simulacrums and screwing with them, or changing the story or changing the message, and you could even do it digitally. There's this whole thing of getting enough data to be able to resurrect dead actors and have them digitally act in new movies, but they're not actually there. They're complete 3D constructs within movies, and that sort of whole what is real anymore, and now we can recreate things.
New conspiracy.
I mean, any technology, when it's in development and people are starting to learn about it and starting to work out what it can do, can be used for bad purposes. And you can even look at nuclear weapons.
You know what the new conspiracy I have?
What's that?
You know what my new conspiracy is, though?
No, I don't.
Actors that are too expensive to pay, and then gonna be digitalized. It could happen.
I mean, well, you can look at all of this as AI replacing people, AI replacing artists with Midjourney, AI replacing writers with ChatGPT, AI replacing actors with digitally creating actors or recreating actors, dead actors, and having them act again, controlled by AI. This is the new technology, and this is the concern that a lot of people have, that creativity will become a thing of the past because people who have the money will have these things, will do it for them, and they're not real people. They're AI constructs. So that's part of the concerns of this era, which are reflected in this movie, in the whole robot being fashioned in the visage of Maria and then running off and changing the story. So, I mean, it's some of what's in this movie from 1927 is very specific to problems that we're seeing today, right now in 2023.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. True.
It's, and the symbolism. I mean, I think that also we can speak to the, granted, the Industrial Revolution didn't end until I think it was 1840, if I'm not mistaken. But in the 20s, especially in the earliest 20s, we see the unrest as a result of that, because we see the working class, the people are actually the workers for the industry, especially on industries or factories. They're seeing how the wealthy industrialists were living in a life of luxury, due to their businesses, and there was I want to call it a social unrest, especially in the early 20th, that I think we could see in this movie, and very obviously,
lavishly.
Yeah.
Well, you can kind of actually see how a reflection of the production line era. I call it the production line era because it's the whole General Motors Ford company. Yeah, well, industrialism, but industry had been going on for a long time, but it required a lot of people being people. So, there was skill to it. Yeah. And that skill was required and it was appreciated. So, even if they were common people, they weren't like rich industrialists. If you had skills, you were wanted and you were appreciated for your skills. Mm-hmm. But then you start having the machines doing the work and needing somewhat unskilled people to operate them. Mm-hmm. And you get onto production line work. Now, in comparison, an artisan...
That's detrimental.
Well, an artisan would be making something from the beginning to end. So be doing a lot of different tasks to get it to the final completion. And when it was completed, sure, it would be more expensive, but it would be well made and it would have that maker's mark on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was a maker. This person made this thing and it's brilliant.
And the exclusivity.
Right? Yeah. But not a lot of people could afford it because, a very skilled person made this thing. And, there's only a few of them that could be made per a certain time period. So, if you could afford one and you could actually find one, then you were lucky or you were special or you were stupidly rich, right? Fast forward to the 20s, you get the introduction of the production line. Now, production line, it spits out things a whole lot quicker, but they're not individual. There's no maker's mark. There's the Ford company logo, right? But no individual person put that vehicle together. It was hundreds of people all doing one job over and over and over. So there's no real skill involved in producing a thing. I knew a guy who worked at a factory in my old hometown. It was they were putting together gearboxes, and they were putting together them from parts that had been shipped in from China. So the parts would get shipped in and they put the gearboxes together. And he used to put in 4 bolts. That was his part of the production line. He put 4 bolts in. He was replaced with a robot.
For the record.
Yeah.
It froze. I did logistics for 15 years. I put more than 4 different production lines in place, importing the big machineries that make the parts. So I know kind of like the anatomy of it. And I mean, they even charge for whoever doesn't get that going because it doesn't stop. It's like 24 hours, several shifts going. Yeah. So it's like they're using people like machines are going to work on the future. So it's kind of laying the bed work for how the economy is going to shape up to be with or without humans on it.
Yeah. Well,
and when you think about it, it's like you have the human factor, but it's like it's a business. Like they say, it's a business, not a charity. So like when you look at it, like, I cannot really like dislike optimizing the.
I mean that's the job of the CEO is to make the company make money for the shareholders. So he's doing his job, but it's screwing the workers over. But what I'm saying is we went from a society which made a few really nice products, and there was people who were appreciated because they had the skills to make them from beginning to end generally, to unskilled workers who just did the same thing over and over again until they went mad with boredom, right? And then they got replaced with robots because they were unskilled. So they were screwed twice, right?
Yeah, it's true.
It's true. And this is what this movie's talking about. Yeah, this is what this movie's talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got
the messed up part about all that. Yeah.
Go on.
No, I was saying the messed up part of all of that is that it's gotten to a point. It doesn't matter if you're skilled about it. A robot's gonna do it better than you. And already the nature of the market, which is what I tell everybody when they're being lazy on their job or something, is like there's always somebody out there that is gonna do it better than you. So that's why people should take care of their jobs and do it as best as they can and put their best effort too. It's because the reality of the word is that it's a very aggressively competitive world out there. And I mean, it's gotten to the point that it doesn't matter if you're good or bad at it. A machine is gonna do it better and faster. So that's where Well, like when somebody's talking to me or like they're afraid that AI is gonna take over our things, it's like how original and how authentic are you? If you're that, you ain't got nothing to worry about. Because a robot can create their own things, but the robot cannot go into your mind and do what only you can do. You know?
Yeah, AI at this stage can't create; it can only interpret and interpolate. So it can combine things that already exist into something new, but it can't come up with something like completely new from scratch.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of the artists are up in arms about, that things like Midjourney are taking their work and bastardizing it and basically screwing with their copyright. So
it's
But I
seen some
think
of these
I think
interesting.
I've seen it too. But here's what I think. I think that that's funny and ironic, and I think it's doomed to fail because the problem is if you're using Midjourney's work and bastardizing it, there's gonna be a point where it's gonna be the time of the truth where you're gonna have to perform publicly one way or another, and the inconsistency is gonna be seen,
No,
and then it's
what
gonna be just worse than
what
what are you saying?
what Ray was talking about is there has been instances where you would tell Midjourney to do something, and Midjourney will return something that someone else has done, and you could see the watermark
Yeah.
on the corner.
Well, basically, the AI is taught by scanning the internet or archives or whatever it happens to be and finding things that it believes represents what your text description is. And it will just take those and interpolate them and mix them up and create something new, in inverted commas. But it's actually taking copyrighted works to do it. So it's not exactly legal in all senses of the word. The earlier versions of Midjourney and things like that, you could tell it was AI produced, and therefore it just doesn't quite have the human sensibilities that you get from an original human work. Be it looks a bit unnatural. A human wouldn't combine those things in that way, but the logic engine of the AI just did it that way because it made the most sense mathematically. Which, you know, there's not a huge amount of maths in art. There is a little bit, but generally it's more feeling than calculation. But this is being done through calculation, so therefore it feels a little bit unnatural. But they're forever improving the AI coding and forever feeding it more artwork and more information to work from, and eventually it will get the gist of how art is put together by a human and copy that, and therefore you won't be able to tell. At the moment, it's a bit of a faux pas to use all AI artwork for products that you're trying to sell. People consider it a bit, you know, underhanded, but eventually you won't be able to tell. And when that happens, and things are really gonna oh boy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh boy.
Yep.
But I mean, that's sort of reflected in this movie. You don't see the ultimate end of it, but you can see that if this guy can create a robot that can run around and incite rebellion, he sure can create robots that can replace people turning the dials and stuff.
Yeah.
So if that had gone any further, like if the guy hadn't fallen off the roof and died, then we would have been seeing all these sorts of things that I've been sprouting on about for the last few minutes.
Yeah. I guess we have come to the point in this podcast that Gio loves. And the question that Gio has been waiting for.
What's your last impressions on?
Through the entire episode.
Number three.
Number three. For all of you watching the
I move it too fast.
So, what are your last thoughts? And I I guess I'll go first because it seems like I have the most positive to say. Kind of. Only because your comments are not technically negative, right? That's why I'm saying kind of, because we're all kind of positive in a way. My final thoughts on this movie are fresh, as we all of our comments are, because we all saw it today basically. The movie, I like this movie, and I would recommend it because you could see not only can you see a snapshot of what was like in that era, but you kind of see and would probably understand the inspiration that was this movie to other sci-fi films out there. There's something said that when you're experiencing, and let me put it this way, it's not necessarily 100% accurate, but when you know of the source, this happens a lot more when you actually read the book and then watch the movie, right? That experience that you get when you watch the movie and you already know the content based on what you read in the book. Well, it's kind of like that, right? Most of this contents on this film was used as inspiration for other films. Well, we talked, what Ray mentioned before, how 3CPO was the inspiration behind the robot. This robot was the inspiration for 3CPO.
I was going to say Star Wars is a little after.
The buildings, it was for Blade Runner. There's so many things, and that we can say about sci-fi, but it also goes outside sci-fi. How this film was the inspiration for many things, and in saying that, the reason why I recommend is you would have a better understanding when you see what those results were and understand where the creator came from when he came up with those concepts that you see nowadays for using this film as an inspiration. I personally enjoyed it at normal speed, but I feel like because of the nature of the film, there's no sound. You could also enjoy it at a faster speed. I think that might not, and again, only Ray out of this group can speak to it, but I feel because of the film is silent, you might not. Now, one thing that I can say though is I never experienced this before, where I'd have to watch the film and really watch it, because it's silent. If you blink, you'll miss something. So just have that in mind. If you watch it at a faster speed, it might be a shorter time because this film is 2 hours and a half. But just have that in mind, that if you blink while having it at a faster speed, you will miss out a lot more than if you just watch it at a regular speed. However, if this means anything to you, I enjoyed it at normal speed. And that's my final thoughts. Who wants to go next?
Well, that way we cannot go next just because Ray is gonna take the floor once I am done. No, this movie was. It's always good to look back to history, and this movie has a lot of that. Again, when you look at things back in time, it's just like you said, Robert. It's kind of like time traveling. It's a time capsule because it shows you what was in people's mind of visioning of what the future was. I mean, we actually are. If you think about it, we are beyond flying cars right now. We actually have drones that look like cars. that they are not just out there flying everywhere because FFA hasn't been able to come up with a system. I mean, we are already on a time and area where, depending on the size of your drone, you need to get a flying driver's license for drone. So it's not like I can go there and buy any drone that I can just remotely control and fly. No, I can't do that anymore. You know, so it shows you a lot, and I think it works well as a paving road to tell tales of where not to actually commit mistakes that could be committed, which hence why you say always is a good thought experiment, and it's true. But it also shows us how we come from.
Yeah.
In an effective way. And I mean, he has that pretty message. I don't want to be negative if I say that's just wishful thinking. You know, the hope is the last thing that we lost as beings and as a communal group. But when we come together, we're powerful, and that movie brings that too in there, because you have that fight for equality, and the only way that they could overcome that was coming together. And what I like much more about the movie that we didn't get to talk much about it is to how dangerous is that, even because we are brings the hatchet. But basically, the movie portrays beautifully. The movie portrays beautifully also of not becoming too victim on the mice, to be blinded by our rage or feelings, and take, instead of in the right direction, things in a whole opposite direction. Like, it was funny how, like, the robot was impersonating that our main character actress, and until she got burned and became the robot, and like everything was seen on her, they didn't realize what we have done, you know. So it has a very, very insightful message also of, like, don't blind yourself for what you're going through to act upon those emotions, because it could be something beyond repair. Like, actually, the person they were trying to burn was the person that helped them save their kids and their offsprings. Go figure, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it's a must watch. Like I told you, this is a movie that probably, if you're working on studying the filmmaking, you'll probably have it as a homework. I bet you. And Mad Scientist, take it away.
Yo. Okay, so it's really great when you can look way back at things that are looking forward. It's kind of that whole looking into the distance and seeing past yourself behind you. And that's sort of what this movie feels like when you watch it now. Now, it's not the YouTube short sort of 60-second, hyper focus and then forget about it 5 minutes later kind of thing. It's an effort to watch this movie, but it's a rewarding effort. I did speed it up. Now, the version on YouTube that I watched had music playing, so it wasn't completely silent. And having sped the music up another 50%, it still sounded fine. Obviously, there weren't any Tweety birds talking, because there's no talking in this movie. There's just the speech cards. But it was fine to watch at a higher speed. But yes, you have to read pretty fast when the cards do come up and they've got a lot of text on them, or you miss, because they'll drop quicker. Yeah, they'll drop quicker. But it was quite watchable, except for the scenes where she was dancing, because she looked a little bit like she was on speed or something. but other than that, like there were a lot of slow scenes where people were trudging along, so it helped with those ones. But this was created in a different era for a different population, and it was a bit of an experiment in that there hadn't been much in the way of movies at this length in this format until this movie was made, and it was sort of the litmus test for the epic movies to follow it. Also, on a cinematography standpoint, Fritz Lang being such a perfectionist meant that I was actually wrong. It wasn't a year; it was 17 months it took them to film it. Yeah, I mean, it was a big effort. There was a lot of stuff that the people acting in it had to go through to make it happen. It was overacted because it was silent, so that can bug people who are used to, normally acted things with normal dialogue. But, working through that difference that we're not used to and, really focusing on it to catch everything that happens in the movie, you get a lot out of it, and you can see the DNA of a whole bunch of other things to follow it coming from this movie. So it is a seminal movie. It is worth spending the time to watch it, even if you speed it up a little bit. But it will give you a lot for the time that you spend on it. So I think it is worth watching. But you will probably cringe a bit at some of the overacting, especially from the mad scientist who's like with his hands. It was driving me bonkers.
Coming from one mad scientist to another.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I had the same problem with the scientist character. I had the same problem with the scientist character in Steins Gate, who was really hamming it up for his friend, almost putting on a completely different persona to the actual guy. And that mad scientist persona was pissing me off too. So it happens regularly, as it turns out. But getting back to this one, it's worth the watch. You may struggle a little bit in dealing with the differences in how movies are made now to how movies were made then. But bear with it. Give it a watch. It's well worth watching. You will spot a few things that you go, I've seen that, repeated in many, many other movies, and this is probably where it started. And as we've discussed, hopefully you will get a lot out of it from a social perspective and from a science perspective and from a cautionary tale perspective. So, there's lots to enjoy in this movie. I think it's well worth the time, and give it a look.
Awesome. Okay, so I guess we're ready for our final segment.
The science.
No final thoughts. Those are being done.
So, are you gonna have a go, Robert? I've got one here that I wanted to bring up. I can do that first if you like.
Well, I'll leave it up to you, because I feel like mine's are not, they're just observations.
Well, just gloss across them quickly. I'm doing the video phone one, so don't do that.
Okay, so I'll go through mine's real quick, and then we can move on to yours. So basically, one of the first things that I want to note, I want to bring to the attention, is the use of electronic displays on this movie. Really, I find that really, really interesting, because if you go back to history, the CRTs were actually demonstrated in 1897, but they were only commercially made in 1922. So you would say, okay, 1922, this movie was made in 1927, until you realize what kind of CRTs that we're talking about.
CRT means cathode ray tube, by the way.
Yeah, thank you for that. And so basically, they were not used for video display. So I really find that really fascinating on the film, how they were able to predict that the CRT would eventually be used as some sort of visual display. And where I'm talking about in this movie, and the type of scenes that I'm talking about, is we start from the display of information into displays that will not normally look like CRTs. They normally would look more like the sticker displays that you would probably are familiar with when you look at stock stickers when you're looking at pricing information on selling and buying stocks. And then
they used a lot of ticker tape. In fact, that was in the movie. He was looking at the ticker tape from the stock.
So you see, and the way that they display those, it's a long display on a wall, and you see how the letters are coming down. Also, they form a communication telephone. It's basically a monitor on this machine. You will pick up the phone, kind of like which is very interesting because that's how you would pick up a phone back in those days. But instead of talking into a megaphone or in any kind of microphone, you're actually basically just talking to a screen where the image of the other person is being displayed, which is basically what we have now with our iPhones when you FaceTime, except that this is a computer screen on a machine. I find that really interesting that how that is being portrayed in this film, based on the fact that the CRTs or the cathode ray tubes were not used for that fashion in 1927.
Well, the movie was filmed between 1925 and 1926, so it's even earlier.
Yeah.
But cathode ray tubes at the time were used for oscilloscopes and things like that in scientific purposes. They weren't used in homes or anything like that. In fact, the first live TV broadcast were, 1935, the world's first regular television service was launched in Berlin with a live broadcast, which I think was Hitler opening the Olympics.
Yeah.
So I think that was the first ever TV broadcast, and it was in Germany where this movie was made.
Yeah. And that's actually our emissary for the aliens. That's the first. The first.
Our electronosphere, the very edge of it is Hitler opening the Olympics. Yeah, way to go, humanity! That'll show those aliens.
Hey, maybe
bring it back, noodles.
Maybe that's why they're not contacting us.
It could be.
There's a lot of
compilation
videos.
They've contracted Nazis. We're not going near there.
So the next thing that I have that I wanted to speak about is, we see the robot Maria, right? This movie uses a humanoid machine that is able to walk and talk and express emotions. It is true that we don't have a robot like that today, but it is very close, right? We can go actually from the walking and we have we talked about this in previous episode, Boston Dynamics, how they have robots that are able to walk in a way that they can actually deal with obstructions in the road in a way that they don't fall, right? And then they can obviously run, they can walk, they can pick up stuff, they can work. So that whole part of it, it's basically just done. And then we have robots. They're basically AI. So this film is bringing those two technologies together and creating one whole, which I feel it's not far off, right? It's that once we achieve that AI, that it would be easier to connect it to a body, kind of like the Boston Dynamics is creating, and have your typical humanoid from a sci-fi film. So this is one of the things that I want to point out, is the fact that the robot Maria, it's an example of that. Where we are not there yet, but we're very close. And my final point on this film is the entire city of Metropolis. it is a very futuristic city with skyscraper, skyscraper. I can't speak today. Blah.
Big buildings.
And big buildings.
Skyscrapers.
It's skyscrapers, yeah. And the transportation that we spoke earlier,
Nice.
the flying cars that, at the time, if you think about it, that was the vision. That was very sci-fi-esque. Right now for us might not be necessarily very sci-fi-esque because they look like planes. I think they just lack the vision on that aspect of it, but just the whole concept of it. This is something that is being worked on today, and not necessarily as a whole of what we see here, but as a combination of its parts. We have projects like, I'm sorry? We have like projects like,
that, like, okay. No, I was gonna say, just for the record, like, like they make cars that actually, like, you can actually hold it and it will fly like a freaking airplane, and it will run like a
Yes.
car. But these are
Mhm.
like concept vehicles, but like they made them and they show you like it works, it flies.
It does.
It just didn't get approved by FFA,
And
but yeah,
well,
it does.
the
They did those
FAA,
kind of concepts too. Like we work around from it.
I don't envy the FAA's work. They are looking at a lot of aspects. Obviously they want the improvement in technology, but they have to take care of the safety, because that's basically, they're all about safety. So not only safety to the pilot, safety for the passengers, and safety for people on the ground. So I think they are working on it. It might take a little longer to get there. Like I said, we had conversations before what I feel personally that the future of the flying cars are in drones, right? However, the technology on drones, the way they are now, will not make it that easier to mass produce a flying car until we come up with solutions. But the drones actually allowed a pilot not to be a pilot. And I believe that if the technology of the drone gets a little better, it would allow the person to sit in the flying car just like you would sit on a car, and just go from point A to point B without really concentrating on the concepts or the fundamentals of flying. But we spoke about that previously. But yeah, we have examples like that where there's a lot of companies that are working on that. As the Hyperloop is another example. We see this a lot more into the comics called the Jetsons. There's kind of like those kind of tubes where you go in one end and end up in the other end and at a really fast speed. So we see concepts that, when put together, we see Metropolis. And this is something that I really find really interesting, where these people had the vision back then to see these advances in technology. Either that, or, like we spoke in previous episode, how people that grew up with the stories feel enough of that story, they want to make those things happen. They want to make those things a reality. Kind of like what happens to the communicator in Star Trek, how it became the flip phone. And it's kind of funny that I mentioned this, because that's ancient history to us now. We have moved on.
Oh, they're coming back. The Samsung are doing flip phones with the bendable screen technology, so that there's not a break in the screen, but you can close them up and have a small, rather than having that massive brick in your pocket, it's half the size. So, with the foldable screens that they're doing now, the flip phone's coming back.
Yeah, I think it was called Samsung.
I'm gonna get.
Mm.
Yes, it is. I'm gonna get a lot of hate just waiting for Tesla phone to come out, because that's gonna take out of the race everybody. Yes, you know it. It doesn't overheat. It
I
charges
am-
on the dashboard of your car. It changes
I am
If you
really.
want to Tesla.
colors by itself. Colors.
I think I am more curious to see it
Come on.
than anything else.
Fetal camera. Yeah, boy. I'm down for that. Bye bye, iPhone.
Okay,
8K camera. What?
so that concludes my science piece. So
Okay.
I would leave it to the mad scientist now to have the.
Excellent. Okay, so you kind of went over the one I wanted to focus on, but according to Acadian Labs, acadianlabs.com, they have a history of video conferencing according to Sci-Fi, and it's likely that the first depiction of video conferencing technology in film is in fact this movie, where the bulky wall-mounted video phone unit, which looks like it could have benefited from minimalist design from the latest Cisco endpoints, makes an appearance when he's talking to Otto, the foreman. So as you said, he's holding a handset like a normal telephone of the time, but he's got the video screen and he can see in real time Otto talking to him. So that's a technology that they definitely didn't have at the time, but is shown as something futuristic, which obviously everybody has done video conferencing. I mean, we're kind of doing it right now across the globe. So it's something that was a depiction of something that became very mainstream by this stage, and is probably the first depiction of it in a movie. So that was pretty groundbreaking. There are some still photos from 1879 showing people sitting in lounge chairs. In fact, let me open that. Open image tab. I'm usually doing all this sort of thing while you guys are talking, so that's why it's taking me a little bit longer here. But so that's the depiction. Punch's Almanac for 1879, where you have a screen of people playing sports, and there's two guys there talking into wired megaphones to talk to them. It's a man and a lady. And their screen is up above their fireplace, which is pretty dangerous for your OLED screens these days to have them above the fireplace because the heat will stuff them. But these guys must have better technology.
Well, to be honest with you, I seen TVs on front of the fireplace.
Me too.
Locally.
Yes, me too.
And I think basically what it is, and I don't know if this helps. Obviously, it does because they're not, repairing these TVs. But the fireplace has a kind of like it's separated from the wall enough that you have a.
It has a glass in front.
Yeah.
But the way they is showing in that image that you showed, that will definitely damage it.
Yeah,
that will help. That will make the fire warmer.
you might find that the lintel above the fireplace is actually blocking a lot of the heat or directing it out away from the screen. But the delicacy to heat of OLED screens and things like that, you want to be really careful, or you'll be buying a new one.
Yeah.
But so that was the one that I really wanted to focus on, the video conferencing depiction, which is apparently the very first one in cinema. And of course, we all enjoy that technology today. So well done. Now, it was Fritz and his wife who wrote the story. So basically, well done, Fritz Langer and his missus for coming up with the idea. So there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And depicting it.
It makes you wonder if we have to thank them, because I still believe that technology is imitating art.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Okay. So is that concludes?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of covered the rest of them with the robotics and things like that.
Oh, so I'm bringing the hammer down instead of Captain Chaos?
Well, everybody gets a turn.
Yeah.
You know? It's a democracy. Everybody gets a turn.
I think that the movie has affected me plenty of. I'm going to become the Hatchminator.
Hatchminator. I want to see that movie.
Oh my God, Becky.
Awesome. Okay.
I got no butt.
So, yes, I really enjoyed I enjoyed this film for the reasons that I mentioned before. I just regret that I didn't see it earlier because it has been in my to watch list for a while. But I'm glad that we finally made time to make an episode of it, so I get a chance to see it. So for all of you, thank you so much for coming to just one more week and listening to us. We really appreciate you listening to our pod, or watching on YouTube. Remember, if you're not a subscriber on YouTube, just reach out, go into our YouTube channel and subscribe. Every little bit helps. But mainly, we just want to thank you very, very much for being with us. We hope that you enjoyed this episode as much as we did making it for you. And reach out to us and let us know what you think about the film, if you've seen it, if you haven't seen it, and if you agree with our comments. Thank you so much. We really, really appreciate you guys being with us. And we can't wait to see what we can bring for you next time. Thank you so much for being with us one more time, and we hope to see you next time.